You're listening to 94.4 FM Salford City Radio, the Friday Sports Show.
You're listening to Salford City Radio, 94.4 FM, the Friday Sports Show with your host, Jimmy Petruzzi, bringing you news from the local area and around the world. And on this show, we've been very fortunate to have interviewed some of the world's best athletes, sports people, coaches, footballers, people who work in sport across a wide range of disciplines, from coaching to sports psychology to many different roles. We also have a segment where we speak to some of the world's most influential people in the field of psychology and related fields who share their insights and perspectives. Today we have a very special guest who's reached the very top of her sport, who's going to give us a fascinating insight in how she got there, some of the achievements, and many more insight into what it's like to play sport at the very highest level. So she plays basketball for GB wheelchair, and she's had many achievements, so I'm sure she'll talk about on the show and give us an interesting insight into what it's like to be a top athlete. So Laurie Williams, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Thank you, thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, no, it's great to speak to you, Laurie. And I suppose if we sort of start with the beginning, how you got into playing basketball, how did that sort of come about yourself?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been a wheelchair user for the majority of my life, and I used to struggle with sport at school. I couldn't really do PE and stuff like that. So my parents were quite keen to still give me opportunities to be active and to participate in sport. So I originally started off with an athletics club doing wheelchair racing, and I ended up being entered into the Greater Manchester Youth Games. They had a very small parasport division at the time. So I was doing a bit of athletics there, and that's when I got spotted by a local basketball coach in Manchester, and she was like, you need to pack this in straight away and come and try wheelchair basketball. It's 10 times better, and so I went along to my first session. I think I must have been about 11 or 12, and I just absolutely loved it, and I've never really looked back since, to be honest.
Wow, it's sort of life-changing moment there. Like really, really powerful stuff. And in terms of, you start playing basketball, at what point do you sort of think, okay, I can sort of go all the way here? Playing basketball is sort of one thing in sport, playing for your country and sort of reaching the top. At what point do you think, well, actually, I think I can sort of play for GB?
Yeah, I think certainly my coach kind of saw potential in me from quite a young age. I'd grown up using a wheelchair, and when people start to play wheelchair basketball, sometimes one of the biggest challenges is being able to coordinate the chair and the ball at the same time. But obviously I had a lot of experience using a wheelchair, and I think I'd somehow developed quite good hand-eye coordination as well. And I think using those skills, and really the pool for women's wheelchair basketball is quite small. It's obviously quite a unique sport, and I think if you're a young girl coming through who's quite athletic and has got a natural ability, you're kind of going to be fast-tracked into the national team. And that's what happened to me, really. I played for the junior team for a few years, and then I made the senior team when I was 16.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I suppose anyone listening who's sort of thinking, and something that we can sort of touch on the show, sort of considering taking up a sport. It's sort of it's really inspiring to what what you've achieved, and how anyone listening could take up sport and has a lot of positive effects. And in terms of yourself, you've had many highlights. You've represented GB at 212, 216. Tell us about what it's like to play at a Paralympic. I mean, the 2012 was really special. It's, in London, and 216. You guys did really, really well. What's it like to sort of participate at Paralympic, Laurie?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of athletes will agree that it really is the pinnacle of our sporting careers. In effect, we kind of end up preparing for it every 4 years. It runs in a 4-year cycle. We have other major championships, European championships and world championships, but everyone's dream is to kind of win a Paralympic medal. And also for us as a sport, wheelchair basketball, it's the only time where we go to an event and mix with other sports. So in terms of the scale, it's just absolutely off the charts. It's massive. something that we're not used to. And again, like I said, because we're quite a niche sport, we often don't attract massive crowds. However, when you go to a Paralympics, because of the publicity that they receive, you know, these stadiums are full and we get to play in front of thousands of people, and it's just something that, you know, you'll never forget. And, you know, when I got selected for London, I was completely over the moon, and in the end I ended up feeling disappointed with the result. However, looking back, you know, a few years later, it's not the result that I remember. It was kind of like the atmosphere and the memories. Absolutely, and just the experience. You know, people always ask you how the experience was, and sometimes the medal's a bit of an afterthought. But I think now the team's in a lot better place, and you know, when we're aiming to go to Tokyo, we're looking to bring back that medal, and I think that will just be a cherry on top of the cake, because we've worked so hard, and we've still not yet managed to bring back that Paralympic medal. And like I said, that's every athlete's dream, really. Absolutely, and I can imagine the sort of buzz in London. It just was incredible, wasn't it? Really, the whole atmosphere, and you know, the public, the UK got behind the event in a big way, really, and kind of set the benchmark in terms of, you know, in terms of, you know, crowds, like you said, the buzz and everything else that went with it. Did you guys sort of feel that buzz, or were you so focused on what you were doing, or did you sort of get a sense of the public in sort of GB getting behind the athletes and sort of really taking to the events? Oh yeah, absolutely. I think just because there was such a big push for it in general, you know, it really created a sense of pride in the community. And I think for us in the Paralympics, it was kind of like, it felt like the first Paralympics where we got kind of like the exposure and the recognition that we deserved. I know Channel 4 did a fantastic job with its promotion of the sport and on TV, and it did kind of mean that, you know, people would see us in the kit and they'd be like, you know, what sport do you play? And I've seen wheelchair basketball on TV, like it's amazing. And you know, we never really got that before. So I just think it really was something very special, and I think the London Games definitely put Paralympic sport on the map, so to speak. Absolutely, yeah, and it was, you know, tremendous, and the atmosphere was great, and it sort of shows how much sport means to the public in the UK. And in terms of 216, you guys sort of reached the semi-final. You know, it's a great achievement in itself. What was that like to sort of get to a semi-final? And I suppose in one sense, it's, you know, obviously, like you said, you know, looking back, it's a great achievement. I can imagine at the time was a bit, you know, frustrating for you guys to have come so far. And yeah, I think it was. I mean, going into the Rio Paralympics, our aim was to make a semi-final. You know, so we kind of achieved that. Yeah. And I think, you know, we played the USA in our semi-final, and you know, we really did like play our hearts out, and it was a competitive, close game. You know, and both teams just played their absolute best basketball, and at the end of the day, the USA came out with the win. But if you look at the history of the teams, you know, USA have had a history of winning, whereas Great Britain, we're trying to create that history. And I think, you know, you can't go from having never won a Paralympic medal or a World Championship medal to then coming home with one. And I really do believe, like, it's a journey. And it has been a journey for us. You know, we didn't perform great in London. We came fourth in Rio. And a couple of years ago, we came away with the silver medal at the World Championships. And that's progression. You know, you have to put in the work, and sometimes it comes down to your squad. And when we were in Rio, we had an incredibly young squad, and now we've had a lot of time together. We've grown together, and that's how you win medals, I think. So really, I think it probably wasn't our time. Everyone would have loved to have gotten a medal at Rio, but I just don't think it was our time quite then. And sort of, you know, it's interesting you say, in terms of your own sort of career, Laurie, you've been with the team for, like, you know, at that level for a long time now, and I guess you're almost like a, you know, fulcrum of the team, really, in the sense that you've you know, from the, you know, you've been there, you've sort of seen the development, obviously preparing for, you know, like you mentioned before, Tokyo. And what's it been like for your sort of career to see things sort of grow? And you know, you mentioned London and Rio, but you've also had a lot of success in the European Championships and other championships. What's it been like for you, your journey? It's been a roller coaster, to be honest. You know, when I first got selected for Great Britain, the team wasn't funded. We barely got given any kit to wear. You know, whereas you fast forward over 10 years, and now we're a fully funded squad. Like, I can do this professionally for a living. You know, we get great kit sponsors, and I just think it's testament for the growth of wheelchair basketball, really. But it's had its ups and downs. I think our whole program has had a shift around. You know, we went from being a non-professional to being professional, and that means kind of we had to move and be centralised in one base, which was before Rio. We moved to Worcester, and we had a couple of coaches brought in from the States. And I think it was quite tough on us. I think they just had a different culture, and they kind of run us into the ground a little bit. And I actually took a year off after Rio, just because I felt mentally and physically fatigued, you know. And I think it had been my identity since I was about 15. Yeah. And sometimes you need that break to realise that there is more to you than being an athlete. And I think for me it helped, you know, taking time out. I came back as a better athlete. You know, I felt like I had more respect for the program had more respect for me. You know, and then with happier athletes and a happier team, we ended up going on to win medals. You know, and now we're on track to win a medal at the Paralympics. So, you know, the journey and the growth has been massive.
Absolutely, and it's interesting you say that the break, and did it give you time to reflect on sort of how far you sort of come and sort of, you know, just sort of your own career? What was the break like for you, Laurie? Was it sort of, like you mentioned, they gave you an opportunity to sort of take a step back type thing, but did you sort of, during the break, did you sort of at any point think, I've got to get back into this, I'm looking forward? What was the break like for you?
Yeah, you know, it was a needed break. Yeah. You know, I ended up getting a job just locally, and it kind of opened my eyes to another world that I'd not seen before. And you know, when you're in the sporting world, you believe that that's everything, and you know, you need to be 100% all the time, and this is the most important thing in the world. But actually, when you step away from that, you realise that it's not, and you know, people don't really care. Like, you know, I could be like, oh, I've been to a Paralympics, and oh, that's nice, and then they just kind of get on with what they're doing, and it's like, oh, I'm not used to that, you know. Absolutely, I've come from this sporting environment where it's like literally everything. And I think it was nice to reflect like that and kind of like almost develop individual and personal skills that I hadn't developed in sport. But after a few months, I kind of felt, you know, actually I'm not finished. I didn't think I'd reached my potential at the time, and you know, I left just because I was worn out almost, and you know, I had a break, and then I was like, actually, I've got more work to do here, and I think it was a great decision because, you know, we've gone on to win medals, and I'm just, you know, that's one of the highlights of my career, so you know, it's kind of all worked out well for me.
Yeah, and so tell us about some of those highlights, Laurie. I mean, for you, which ones sort of stand out for you in terms of competitions and medals won?
Yeah, I definitely have to say the 2018 World Championships. You know, that was a big tournament for us, and we said that we wanted to medal, and obviously when you have that expectation, there's a lot of pressure put on you. And going into that tournament, I think we'd lost 9 consecutive games or something, and to go into a major tournament, you know, on the back of a 9 losing streak, it's really tough. And, you know, for some teams, I think it can put a lot of doubt in their minds, but you know, I think when we got into that environment, we were just like, you know, this is it. You know, we just turn up every game. We play to win, and we really, you know, blew teams out of the water. I think sometimes people have underestimated us, but we showed what we were capable of. And you know, even in the final, we put in a great game against our biggest rivals, the Dutch. They came away with it, but you know, we've never won a World Championship medal before, so you have to be really pleased with the progress. And yeah, I just thought, you know, we've had some terrible performances in the past, and when I was younger, I probably thought I didn't know if the team would be in a place to ever be a medal-winning team, but here we are, and you know, it's something that I'm really proud of. Yeah,
I sort of sense with yourself, Laurie. I mean, you're a real competitor. You know, you got this sort of strong desire to win, and I mean, in terms of yourself, what do you prepare mentally for the events? I'm sort of curious. I suppose the listeners are too. I mean, do you have a specific way of preparing mentally for the events? Or, I mean, you're obviously a strong character and a strong desire to win, but do you have a specific sort of routine that you do, or anything that you sort of any sort of work you do sort of to prepare the mind?
Like a couple of things. I think for me, I need to reassure myself that, going into a big tournament where there's a lot of pressure on you, you have to remember it's not the be-all and end-all of everything. People win and lose games, people win and lose tournaments, and that's the reality. And I think when you come to accept that, you might win and be over the moon, you might lose and be really disappointed, but either way, the world keeps kind of turning, and you have to be grateful that you've been given this opportunity. So from a broader perspective, I like to approach it like that. But then when we're in competition, I'm a big fan of kind of internal dialogue. Before a game, you can literally say whatever you wanted to yourself. It's just to you, no one can hear what you're saying. So I used to say, like, you're a fantastic player. We've got a great team. No one can stop what we're doing, and I would say it over and over to myself, and it kind of worked. Like, no one could stop me, no one could stop what we were doing. And when you fill yourself with positive thoughts, you're more likely to act on them, aren't you? So
absolutely,
I found that really helpful.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And in terms of physical training, what's the sort of physical training like that you mentioned there when the American coaches came over and sort of the demands that they sort of their training sort of regime, but what do you generally do? Do you sort of train? Do you guys train away from the sort of training camps as well? What's the sort of physical sort of? I know obviously you're probably not going to give any secrets away to any competitors, but generally speaking, what's the sort of training like?
Yeah, so we're still a centralised program. We're based in Sheffield now.
Okay.
And we're required to kind of commit to 3 days a week, which is team sessions. Where we go up and down, we play with one another, and then we'll also have to do kind of like a couple of gym sessions in there, where we work on strength and injury prevention stuff, and then we'll get a couple of shooting sessions up. So there's so many elements to wheelchair basketball, so there's a lot of different things that we have to work on. So it can be quite demanding. But I think in one way, obviously this year with the coronavirus and everything like that, it's meant we've had to kind of adapt our training and what we're doing, and we can't be with each other as much as we used to be.
Of course, yeah.
But in a way, that's kind of played to our favour. It used to be a lot of quantity over quality in terms of training. It'd just be like we train more and we'll get better, but that's not always the case.
Absolutely.
You've got to be clever with your training, and that is exactly what we're doing now. And I think the girls are enjoying it more. We're not as fatigued, and the combination of those two things means that your performance is better. And that's definitely what we're seeing. So it's still really grueling and tough, as you would expect going into a Paralympics. But I think it's about getting the balance right of work life almost. Yeah,
and that's interesting. And in terms of yourself, you sort of studied as well, and I think for any sports person or anyone really, it's important that they sort of do study. I think education is a big thing to have. And tell us a bit about you obviously Loughborough, and you studied in the States as well, Laurie.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. What was your experience? A lot of people will be familiar with sort of Loughborough, the UK sports union. What was your experience of sort of studying at Loughborough and in the States as well?
Yeah, it was fantastic. One of the reasons I chose Loughborough was obviously because it's a fantastic sporting university, and they were able to give me scholarships and try and support with studying and training. And this was while I was preparing for the London Paralympic Games. And it was a fantastic institution, and actually it's just been accepted as to one of the new wheelchair basketball performance centres. So which is great. Like there's 4 different professional women's teams in the country now, and one of them's going to be at Loughborough, and hopefully I can go back and represent them because I didn't have the chance to at the time. But it was great. It was great for me, educationally and also for sport. And after I graduated there, I went on to the States, which just seemed like the right choice for me at the time, the right progression. I was able to get a master's, and the collegiate system in the States is just fantastic. It's really competitive. And you can come away with a degree at the same time. And I think the culture was different for sure. I was in Alabama, which is the deep south, and it's extremely different from Manchester where I grew up. But it was fantastic. Like, I wouldn't change that experience from the world. I think again, it helped me develop as an individual, and it also helped me develop as a basketball player. And I think those are the 2 most important things at that time. So
absolutely. And I think that what you've mentioned there, sort of really interesting in terms of the developments of sport in the UK, and certainly wheelchair basketball in terms of it seems to be growing in terms of the infrastructure. How important is it that it sort of keeps going, Laurie, and sort of keeps growing where you've got sort of strong competition within the UK as well? Like you mentioned, the collegiate system, it's there's always strong competition for the the American athletes. They've got a strong base, but certainly the UK has come a long way within Olympic sports, or a lot of Olympic sports in the last 10, 15, 20 years. But what's the sort of situation around sort of wheelchair basketball and competitiveness within the UK domestically?
Yeah, I think domestically it could be better. Yeah. At the moment we don't have a professional league over here, which means a lot of our the players who end up playing for the GB men's team, for example, they'll go abroad to play.
Yes.
Because the leagues over there are professional, so Spain, Germany, Italy.
Yeah.
It's remarkable what they've done out there, really. These teams are big household names, and they draw in a lot of crowds, and they get great sponsors, and it's not quite the same over here. I'm not entirely sure why that is. I think the British public at the moment are more interested in other sports, which is a shame. But in terms of the development of the women's game, these high performance centres are massive. Because at the moment, wheelchair basketball domestically is mixed. So it's men and women competing in the same team, which obviously can be tough, just given the physical differences. For women to have that opportunity to compete with and against women, it's just massive, and it pushes the women's game forward leaps and bounds, and I think that's really important. But I would love to see professional leagues for both men and women in this country, because I just know how great a sport wheelchair basketball is, and
absolutely,
people see it on the TV, and actually the feedback is all really positive. So I think if we were given the chance to come in and watch games and see how the league unfolds, we'd get a lot of attention. It's not there right now, but hopefully in the future we'll get there.
Absolutely. I mean, he's definitely come a long way in terms of, like you've mentioned, in terms of and high performance centres and which is fantastic. But obviously it's sort of always improving, and I suppose it's a testament to how well you guys do when you think that some of the countries around the world have got the professional leagues and that sort of stuff. So in one sense, if that can improve, then who knows how far the sport will go in this country. Yeah. And in terms of sort of vision yourself, Laurie, what's your sort of vision going forward? Sort of more of the same? You keep going, and obviously there'll be certain things you keep to yourself and you don't want to sort of share. But generally speaking, where do you sort of see yourself going forward within the basketball?
Yeah, I think partly it will depend on how we do in Tokyo. I'd love for us to do well there. But I still think the team's quite young, and I still think we've got a lot to offer. And if we're in a good place, I'd love to keep going until Paris. Because our chances will be high again, I think. And also for me, I think the next few years is important, because I do want to push these high performance centres and really get them off the ground running, so to speak, and make them as big as they should be. I think it'll be nice maybe to have a bit of time out after Tokyo, and I don't know, potentially explore other avenues and just be a regular human for a change. All athletes like to do that, but at the moment I think I'm in a good place as an athlete, the team's in a great place, and hopefully we'll stick together and see another cycle through and see what happens.
Absolutely. And I mean, you sort of mentioned other avenues, and obviously you sort of totally focused on Tokyo, and that's sort of a huge huge sort of platform, and it doesn't get bigger than that really. In terms of sort of maybe beyond that, would you consider coaching and with your experience and sort of helping some of the younger players, like maybe even in recruitment? Like, is there talent ID programs similar to yourself? Are you had the opportunity to sort of to play? Is that something that you'd maybe look at doing, Laurie? Or
yeah, potentially. I do love wheelchair basketball, and I'd love to stay involved in some capacity. I don't think I'm the right personality for coaching. You get some people who are completely well suited to it, and others like me are just I just can't quite get the words out. I'm like, I don't understand. Well, just do it. Like, why can't you just do it? It just kind of comes naturally to me, and I probably wouldn't make the best coach, but I'd love to stick around. And I think, if I end up representing Loughborough, I'd love to be able to build that program more and see what comes out of it, and hopefully build similar programs all over the country. I'm from Manchester, and I'd love to see one up here.
Absolutely,
get a collaboration with one of the universities up here and see what we can get out of that. But I think we're just on a great page, and I think the future for wheelchair basketball in this country is good at the moment.
No, it's brilliant stuff. It's good to hear, and certainly it sounds positive, really, and the performance sound great as well. And I suppose if there's anyone listening from the University of Manchester, maybe they can sort of take note and think, let's get a program up and running. And I think
exactly.
and it's really, I mean, the more competition, I suppose, I think that's key, really, to have a strong domestic competition. And what you guys have achieved is sort of phenomenal, really. And I suppose, with your experience, Laurie, the experience that you've gotten, you've sort of competed around the world, and you've been at the Olympics and the Europeans and the World Championships, and I think it's really important that that sort of people like yourself, stay in the sport in some capacity, to offer your expertise, to sort of help it progress. Really, I think one thing that's for sure, I think, like you mentioned before, the funding. One thing that is really important. I think that sort of sport does get funded. It seems to make a difference in terms of sort of funding. Has it made a big difference to have the backing and sort of be able to focus full time on what you're doing? And
oh yeah, it's made an absolute world of difference. Obviously, we're funded through UK Sport.
Yeah.
And I think just getting that, it just means that we can commit completely to what we're doing and really dedicate our time to it. And the results show. And it's not just. It doesn't just benefit the team. I think sometimes it benefits more people than that, the whole country. People like to see people succeed. I feel like, especially in Paralympic sport, you get a great reward from doing well, and the public love to see it. So it is invaluable being on funding, and it's definitely helped us heaps and bounds. And I'm hoping we go to Tokyo, get the results we deserve, and kind of stay on it, and manage to do the same in Paris to come. So
absolutely, no, that's for sure, and that's sort of great point. And certainly our listeners, and no doubt we'll sort of keep an eye out to see how you guys do in Tokyo, and we certainly sort of wish you all the best, and sort of carry on that success. I think it's great stuff, and I think it's really important that that all, as many teams as possible are supported. In going into Olympics, the public, the UK public, the GB public loves their sport, and I think there's nothing better than seeing people succeeding at the pinnacle. So I really want to thank you, Laurie, for sort of coming on the show. It's been great talking to you. It's been a really interesting insight. Now that the listeners have been really interested in what you've had to say, and no doubt they'll sort of keep an eye out for you guys in Tokyo. So we wish you all the very best there, and thanks again for joining us on the show.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, thanks for having me. I loved it.
Thank you, Laurie. That was Laurie Williams.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Laurie. That was Laurie Williams. She's a participant and player for GB wheelchair basketball. Has a prolific career, and no doubt has a lot more within her career, a lot more achievements to come. So certainly to our listeners, is keep an eye out for the GB team, Paralympic team, wheelchair basketball Paralympic team in Tokyo. I'm sure they'll sort of give a good account and make the nation proud. So 94.4 FM, Salford City Radio, the Friday Sports Show, your host, Jimmy Petruzzi.